it's time for another challenge. This is the minimum element challenge. Here is what you need to do. Write a method called readIntegers that reads a comma-delimited list of numbers entered by the user from the console and then returns an array containing the numbers that were entered. Next, write a method called findMin that takes the array as an argument and returns the minimum value found in that array. In the main method, call the method readIntegers to get the array of integers from the user and print these out using a method found in java.util.arrays. Next, call the findMin method, passing the array returned from the call to the readIntegers method. Print the minimum element in the array, which should be returned from the findMin method. A tip here: assume that the user will only enter numbers, so you don't need to do any validation for the console input. So pause the video, try out the challenge, and when you're ready, come back and see my solution. Pause the video now. Welcome back. I hope you managed to do well with that challenge. Let's go through my solution. I've already created a project called Minimum Element Challenge and a main class in the dev.lpa package. Let's now break this down into smaller pieces. First, I need to write the method, readIntegers, and that has no parameters. I'm going to put that just below the main method and make it private because I don't want any other classes to access this method. Private static int array readIntegers. I'll create my scanner instance, then print out some simple instructions, and save the value returned from a call to scanner.nextLine. In this code, I first create a scanner variable and I have a scanner instance because I want to prompt the user to enter a list of integers separated by commas. And then I'll read that data from the console by using the nextLine method from the scanner class. This code doesn't compile yet because it wants me to return an array, so I'll write the code for that next. If you recall, in the last video I introduced you to a method on string called split, which splits a string and gives us an array of string. Let's use that method here. String array splits equals input.split with a comma as the argument. Int array values equals newint with a length of splits.length. And return the newly created array. Again, I'm not going to include any validation in this code to check if only integers were entered. I'll just take the input and split it by the comma because the challenge asks for a comma-delimited list of numbers. This is going to give me an array of string, but I really want an array of integers, so on the next line, I'm creating a new integer array and setting it to the same length as the number of values they entered. And then I return the array back to the calling method. This method compiles now, but the array I'm returning is full of zeros at the moment. I now need to pass each of the strings into an integer and add each to the integer array. We can do that with the integer wrapper class and the parseInt method. I'll loop through my array. Values element I equals integer.parseInt with the argument splits element I.trim. In this code, I'm using a traditional for loop to loop through the splits array I created and splitting the input by commas. For each value in the splits array, I'm passing it to the integer.parseInt method, as you can see on the right side of this assignment. Notice here that I'm chaining the trim method to the value contained in the array element. I know I mentioned no validation was needed, but I have added code to trim any spaces before passing, otherwise passing might fail. I'm going to assign that result to the same spot in my integer array because there should be a one-to-one correlation between these arrays. There is no other validation. But if you went the bonus mile and added some in there, that's great. I'll build out my findMin method before I do any testing. You can write this method a couple of different ways. I'll start with a traditional way of getting a minimum value from an array. Again, I'll make this method private. The challenge told us to call this method findMin and wants it to take an integer array as an argument. Private static int findMin with an int array parameter called array. I'll initialize the largest integer to a new variable min. Here I'm starting by setting up a local variable called min and setting it to the highest number that an integer can hold. We've used this value on the wrapper class previously in the minimum and maximum challenge earlier in the course. This field holds the maximum integer value an int can be. So why am I actually setting the min variable here to the maximum value that an integer can actually hold? I want to compare the first number the user enters to this number, and it's probably a good assumption that whatever the user entered will be less than this number. Another approach would be to set min to the first element of the array and then compare it with each of the others. The point here is that there are many different ways to code a particular challenge solution. This was my solution. The next thing I now need to do is cycle through the array and find the smallest number. that is the minimum value. I'll set up a for each loop on the array passed to the method. If the value of the current element is less than our variable min, then set min to be the value in the current element. And now return the smallest number found. We know this loop processes every element in the array I specify to the right of the colon in the parentheses there. I'm calling the loop element L for simplicity, and for each element I'll compare it to the min variable. The first time in this loop, I'll compare whatever the user entered as their first number to the max underscore value, which I set min to. And it's highly likely the number will be less than the current min value, so we'll set the min value to the first value the user entered in this first iteration. After that, it will get changed only if another number is less than the first number they entered. As a result, by the time the loop has completed, we have the smallest number in our variable min. Okay, so that's my findMin method. Let's test out this code from the main method. I'm going to invoke findMin on the line after the call to the readIntegers method. Int array returned array equals read integers. Print out arrays.toString for returned array. Int returned min equals findMin, passing returned array, and print min. To start with, I've set up an array of int and called that variable returned array, and I'll assign that to whatever I get back from the readIntegers method, and then I'll just print that out. Then I pass that array to the findMin method and assign that value returned to returned min, which I then print. Let's try this out. We get prompted to enter a list of numbers. I'm going to enter 8 numbers. The output shows that min equals 3. And since the number 3 is the lowest of all the numbers I entered, we know that everything is working correctly. Alright, so that was my solution to the challenge, and I hope you had a little fun with that. Maybe you came up with a different way to get the minimum value, like sorting the array first and then just getting the first element as one example. That's another good option depending on the size of your array. Time to move on. The next challenge is very similar. In fact, in the next video, I'll start with this code base for that challenge. So keep this project open and I'll see you in the next video.